My boss tried to write me up for getting a drink in the break room, only to find out he'd been caught in a lie by security. This narrative is a lengthy one that dates back to my time working at a casino. For those who believe it would be an excellent job, I must clarify that it is not as luxurious as it appears, especially when employed in the kitchen. To provide some context, when I began my job at this establishment, I was young, still enrolled in college, and juggling two part-time positions simultaneously. Initially, it was merely acceptable. I had been hired as a steward, which is simply a more sophisticated term for dishwasher, a role I was familiar with from my previous restaurant employment. However, there were several disparities. I won't delve into every detail, just the ones pertinent to this account. The primary difference I appreciated was that, due to the numerous restaurants, we stewards were rotated daily among them. One day you might be in the steakhouse, the next in the buffet, followed by the Italian restaurant, then the sandwich shop in the bingo hall, and so forth. This ensured you were constantly engaging with different colleagues and experiencing varied environments. Although I was labeled as peculiar for enjoying this aspect, I argued that if you happened to work with someone you didn't click with, you would soon enough be with someone else. Another notable difference was the casino's profound disdain for labor unions. Biannually, there would be a mandatory meeting featuring extensive presentations denouncing the supposed malevolence of unions. Moreover, propaganda against unions decorated the employee hallways. After some time with the casino, my supervisor approached me with an offer to transition from part-time to full-time. I accepted, as the benefits were appealing. Along with medical and dental insurance, I would also gain access to legal counsel among other perks. In hindsight, it was fortunate I made that decision because, a few months later, significant changes occurred. I was unaware of the catalyst, but nearly everyone seemed to dislike the new policies. For instance, the requirement to provide a doctor's note for sick days was eliminated. Therefore, if an employee was ill and did not show up, they would receive a penalty point against them, regardless of evidence from a physician. Consequently, it led to cooks and stewards showing up to work, vomiting into trash cans because they couldn't afford to miss a shift and jeopardize their eligibility for raises. Additionally, there was a plan to reduce the number of full-time positions. While I remained secure in my job, anyone leaving would not be replaced, resulting in only 2 full-time roles per department. Speaking of departments, this brings me to the next major alteration. The stewarding department would be dissolved. Although our supervisors remained, we were now under the authority of the chefs and managers of each restaurant. This also meant that the rotation of assignments was no more. I found myself stationed in the steakhouse, and fortunately, I had 2 wonderful female colleagues. We worked so well together that we were nicknamed AAA since all our names began with the letter A. During our time there, I began to aspire to promote within the casino. Although I recognized it would be challenging, my ambition was to purchase my family's cabin from my parents and live in the countryside while completing my college education. Unfortunately, my first attempt to become a supervisor was unsuccessful, and I ended up training the individual who did secure the position. I did not voice any complaints. Instead, I took it as a cue to improve my performance. This is where our main tale unfolds. Our head chef was being transferred to the Italian restaurant, and the assistant chef was set to take his place, necessitating the hiring of a new staff member. Let's refer to this new hire as Kevin. When Kevin first joined us, he appeared to be unremarkable, neither particularly impressive nor terrible. He was just there, and we seldom had the chance to converse due to our often busy schedules. Approximately a month after Kevin's introduction to the team, I had my first genuine interaction with him, and it was quite an experience. During the evening rush, I informed my coworkers that I was going to fill my water bottle before things got too hectic. They agreed and said they would do the same once I returned. However, before I could leave the steakhouse for the break room, Kevin called out to me. "Kevin, where are you headed?" Me, "Just grabbing a drink before we get busy." Kevin, "Then why aren't you using the waitstaff drink fountain?" Me, blinking, bewildered. "We were informed when we started that employees should only get drinks from the break room." Kevin, "Don't give me that. I see the waitstaff getting drinks from there all the time. You are simply trying to waste time. I'll have to write you up for this." Me, wasting time. "The break room is just down the hall." In the duration of this conversation, I could have already gone down there, filled my bottle with ice, retrieved my drink, and returned. Kevin opened his mouth to retort, but before he could speak, the head chef noticed us and approached to see what was occurring. Before I could interject, Kevin explained the situation with an air of superiority, though it quickly faded as the chef addressed him. "Chef, Kevin, OP is correct. Employees are permitted to use the drink fountains in the break room. Sigh, I will need to discuss this with the waitress supervisor. Op, please go get your drink. I need to speak with Kevin privately." Following that, I left. I felt perplexed by the encounter. At first, I was inclined to give Kevin the benefit of the doubt, believing he genuinely didn't know about the rule and might have thought chefs and supervisors were allowed to use the waitstaff station. Yet, when I shared my experience with my coworkers, they relayed similar tales of being reprimanded by him for minor rule infractions. They suggested he was merely marking his territory and likely would have gone easier on me had I not questioned his authority. Consequently, I began to observe Kevin more closely. To my surprise, the waitstaff ceased interaction with him, clearly angered by his enforcement of rules at their station. It became evident how frequently he had been socializing with them. He regularly summoned my colleagues to assist him with menial tasks, such as peeling potatoes for extended periods, leaving me alone. Moreover, whenever I paused to converse with one of my supervisors, who was a young woman, he would shout at me to return to my duties. I increasingly suspected he possessed ulterior motives. These suspicions were confirmed one sweltering summer day. For those unfamiliar with working in a professional kitchen, it can become unbearably hot, especially in summer, where the odors can become overwhelming. On that day, while I was at one of the large sinks cleaning off the remnants of perch and scrubbing the pans, Kevin called me to his office. This was unusual, as I had only ever been summoned there for brief evaluations or minor raises. Intrigued, I followed him into the small room where he gestured for me to enter first. Inside, I found a woman I had never encountered before seated at one of the desks. When I stepped in, she looked up from her tasks with a perplexed expression, as if to inquire, "Hello, can I assist you?" Kevin then closed the door, walking backwards into the room. "Kevin, you stink. Woman, excuse me." At that remark, Kevin quickly turned around, for the woman was glaring at him, and Kevin seemed bewildered. It became clear he was unaware of her presence. "Kevin, sorry, I misspoke. I meant he smells bad. We've received complaints about his body odor." At that moment, I noted that the room was small, leaving me feeling cramped alongside these two individuals. Given our arrangement, I was close to the increasingly annoyed woman. "Woman, I don't detect any unpleasant smells. Sir, may I move a bit closer?" I told her it was fine, and she stepped closer to sniff me. She performed this action 2 or 3 times before stepping back. "Woman, I don't notice any odors." It was then that I spoke up. Look, if someone suggested that I had an odor, I apologize. However, I am working over greasy sinks filled with chemicals to wash pans coated in fried perch in a room that feels like it's 100 degrees. Additionally, the aprons we are provided are far from ideal. To illustrate my point, I gestured to my apron, which was damp and littered with fish remnants. "Woman, I understand. I will need to inspect those and determine if any require replacing." "Op, why don't you go cool down in the break room? Kevin, you stay. We need to discuss some matters." After that, 3 important things occurred. Firstly, the stewards received new aprons, much to our delight, as the previous ones had gone unamended for years. Secondly, moving forward, if Kevin wished to address me about any concerns, another staff member needed to be present as a witness. If a witness was not available, I was instructed to locate the woman, who I learned was the steakhouse manager. Meanwhile, my relationship with Kevin rapidly deteriorated. While he could no longer corner me privately, he began to yell at me publicly whenever the opportunity arose. If he spotted me idling, such as waiting for the dishwasher to fill, he would shout from across the room for me to return to work before resuming his conversation with one of the female staff members. He would nitpick every little thing I did, seemingly to make my work life miserable. Over time, I realized he perceived me as an obstacle to his relationships with the female staff, as I maintained good rapport with all of them. At times, I wondered if he viewed me as a harem protagonist, given the number of women I worked with. Throughout the following year, I made every effort to stop him while simultaneously striving to achieve that supervisory role. I approached human resources, submitting formal complaints, only to receive the dismissive response, "What do you want us to do about this?" When I turned to my head supervisor, he simply advised me to develop thicker skin. Each day, the situation seemed to worsen. Compounding my struggles, my identity was stolen twice first, my bank account was targeted, followed by my tax return. With the bank unwilling to assist and the casino's legal team dragging their feet, I remained in the red for an extended period, exacerbating my troubles. There were days I found myself scavenging for cans in the break room to afford gas, and I had to give away one of my cats. With Kevin adding to my stress, I experienced days when I genuinely contemplated ending my life. Fortunately, there were still kind-hearted individuals around. Several of my coworkers banded together to provide me with small food packages, and some line cooks even helped discreetly pass me meats destined for disposal. Then came the pivotal night. It was a concert night, and one of the coldest nights of the year. So frigid that some keys snapped in their locks due to the freezing temperatures. I managed to reach my car, turn it on, and let it run for a few minutes before heading back to the locker room for a small comfort, a book. My intention was to read a few pages before departing. However, before I could complete my first paragraph, the locker room doors swung open, and in strode Kevin. He scanned the room before his eyes locked onto me, and a sinister smile spread across his face. "Kevin, who gave you permission to punch out, op?" "Not me, that's for certain. I just received a complaint from the night crew stating that your dishwasher is a disaster. Clearly, you didn't clean it at all. Now go back there and wash it right now, and don't even think about clocking in again, or else you'll be terminated." He then exited the room, laughter trailing behind him. For a moment, I sat there in sheer bewilderment, questioning if he even had the authority to do that. Panic settled in losing my job was something I could not bear. I was overdue on my student loans, having dropped out of college by this point for several reasons, falling behind on my parents' rent, and barely making ends meet to provide for the one cat I had been able to keep. For the first time in years, an overwhelming wave of fear washed over me, threatening tears at any moment. But then, I snapped back to reality. My anger took over. This individual had tormented me for far too long. Regardless of whether he had the authority or not, I was done. I needed to take action. Rising from my seat, I concocted a plan fueled by my fury. I had kept the identity theft incident secret from my parents, partly due to shame and partly out of pride, wanting to resolve this turmoil independently. No more. I would inform them about my situation and request to move back in with them. I would even solicit their assistance in finding a new job. Admittedly, it would mean giving up my dream of living in the country, but stability took precedence at this juncture. Before I could execute any part of that plan, another thought crossed my mind, igniting a smile. He wanted me to clean the dishwasher immediately without clocking back in. Fine, I would do just that. With resolve, I exited the locker room, barely acknowledging the security guard stationed nearby as he attempted to catch my attention. No, I ignored him and others as I mentally geared up for execution. Upon my arrival in the kitchen, piles of dirty dishes, pots, pans, and a plethora of items awaited cleaning, quantities only seen on concert nights. Yet, I dismissed that too, including the 3 stewards laboring diligently, shutting down the machine and emptying it. "Night steward, what are you doing?" Me, apologies, but Kevin informed me that the dishwasher was left in disarray, and I was instructed to clean it without clocking in or I would be terminated. The color drained from their faces. Once one of them regained composure, he explained that none of them had encountered Kevin and that the machine had been perfectly clean when they started their shifts. Although this made me feel guilty for delaying their responsibilities, Kevin had ordered me to do it, so I followed his directive while ensuring everyone knew who had sent me. Realizing I wouldn't give in, even though the machine had been drained, one of them went to fetch the night supervisor. During his absence, the others debated whether Kevin had the authority to mandate work past our shifts and threaten termination. It didn't help that the casino notoriously offered employees accommodations during inclement weather, only to employ them throughout the night while they remained on call. When the night supervisor arrived, she inquired about the situation. As I recounted my story while cleaning the machine, She clarified that Kevin hadn't communicated anything to her and that he lacked the authority to fire me. I responded that I could not risk it. I then asked her how to submit my 2-week notice. This bewildered her further as she wondered why I would plan to leave if I was just intending to resign anyways. I explained that I required time to arrange for my future and that obtaining one final paycheck was crucial. Thus, I prepared my 2-week notice, explicitly stating the reasons for my departure, and then set off home. When I arrived, the clock read 3 a.m., and with my anger spent, I crashed onto my bed fully dressed in my uniform. The following morning, I awakened to the sound of my phone ringing. It was the casino. The head stewarding supervisor requested that I come in to discuss the events from the previous night. Initially, I refused, saying I couldn't go in early just to return home again. However, he insisted it was important. Intrigued, I agreed to come in an hour or two later. Upon my arrival, I found myself led back to the steakhouse office, which was packed with people. The night supervisor was present, along with the night security officer, several head chefs, my supervisors, and the steakhouse manager, who looked as though her face might ignite with fury as she stared at the solitary figure seated before her Kevin, hunched over like a child in time out. I was informed that they were aware of what transpired. After my conversation with the night supervisor, she consulted security and reviewed footage showing Kevin peering out the door before heading to the locker room and departing with a smile just minutes before I exited. Once Kevin was summoned, he attempted to fabricate a narrative, claiming the incident had never occurred and suggesting I was lying to get him in trouble. The supervisors pointed out that reviewing surveillance tapes would clarify the matter since the security guard was monitoring the area when I left the break room. Kevin promptly recalled our earlier encounter, but insisted that I had misunderstood and he would never instruct me to work without clocking in. The night supervisor, along with others present, probed him relentlessly, asking why I would lie, who led him to believe the dishwasher required cleaning, and why I alone needed permission to depart. As Kevin struggled to maintain his fabricated story, he ultimately recognized he had been caught. The steakhouse manager turned to me, extending an apology and inquiring if I would consider staying. The head manager followed suit, also apologizing and asking the same. Briefly, I contemplated declining their offer. However, a spontaneous notion struck me: what if by staying, I could pursue that supervisor position and avoid leaving? Thus, I consented, but only under the condition that Kevin would no longer have any direct communication with me. Should he have any issues, he would need to direct them to the head chef unless it was an emergency. They agreed. Subsequently, I learned several reasons why they finally took decisive action. The least likely reason, in my view, was that this incident drew the attention of someone higher in authority who demanded explanations for the numerous complaints filed against Kevin. Secondly, they likely intended to retain my services. Remember, I mentioned that we formerly rotated among various departments. It turned out I was one of only 2 individuals who possessed the knowledge to operate in every restaurant. This meant I could seamlessly transition to any area without wasting valuable time during training. However, the most plausible reason involved the looming threat of a union. Word of the prior night's events spread throughout the casino rapidly, and if they failed to address the issue, there was an increased chance that union representatives would take action. Ultimately, I remained in the steakhouse longer than Kevin, who left 2 years later. Before his departure, I even proposed a pizza party for all employees to celebrate his exit. Update. As numerous questions and comments have arisen, I decided to compile this update to address as many concerns as possible. First, the length. Did anyone read the initial sentence of my post? It clearly stated that it would be lengthy, so why express displeasure when I provided prior notice about the length? For those who perceived the beginning as superfluous, I intended to convey the working environment conditions that I and others endured which would become relevant later, such as the significance of being one of the few individuals familiar with every area. Second, my car. Yes, I did turn off my car. I apologize for failing to mention that initially. Third, legal issues. Some of you inquired about why I didn't contemplate suing the casino or Kevin, or suggested that I should have. To be frank, I did dream about pursuing that option. However, given the casino's jurisdiction on Native American land, Any legal matters were directed to a counsel, and it was widely recognized that employees attempting to contest decisions against the casino were likely to lose. Additionally, considering my financial struggles at that point, I doubted I could afford legal representation. Fourth, why I stayed for so long. This was a point I considered including in my original post, but opted to omit for brevity. The unfortunate reality was the lack of well-paying job opportunities during the recession, making employment difficult to secure. Although I could have sought a transfer to another department, doing so would require me to start anew. As a full-time employee, transitioning would cause me to lose both my current benefits and any accrued raises. I admit I was too fearful to navigate without the benefits for an unpredictable duration. Fifth, Kevin's punishment. At the time, I was content knowing that some form of action was being taken, even if I couldn't witness it directly. Some of you suggested I should have requested his position instead of facing repercussions. However, the role of assistant chef is not accessible to just anyone. It necessitates years of experience and learning. At that time, I lacked the requisite skills and training for even a line cook position. Sixth, the ending. Once again, I apologize for the unsatisfactory conclusion. I realize many anticipated a more dramatic finale. However, I have come to accept that life rarely delivers grand conclusions. Instead, I have learned to appreciate my accomplishments and move ahead. Regrettably, I never managed to keep the cabin. While I successfully navigated the identity theft issues, I did not secure the supervisory role I aimed for. Ultimately, I felt disheartened when they justified my rejection with the remark, "Op, you adhere to the rules too well." That was the breaking point. Still, life has improved tremendously since then. Because I endured that difficult period, I met my soulmate. Shortly after that pivotal rejection, I expanded my job search efforts. Though I lost the cabin and the home I adored, I now own a home with my wife. Ultimately, I am living a comfortable life. I consider that my greatest triumph.